So centering is one of the foundations of pottery, and if you can't center well, it's going to be really hard to get nice symmetrical pots. So there's a lot of videos out there showing people how to center, but I want to focus on the troubleshooting side. So there's a lot of symptoms that shows why you're doing something wrong, and I'll go through each step, each common issue that people have, and the reason behind it and how to solve it. So the first thing that tends to happen is you put your clay down, you go in center, and then it just slides off. When that happens, it means that the clay is either too wet, the bat might be too wet, you want to stick it down, give it a good wiggle. Sometimes it even helps just to seal the edge. So first step of centering is to cone up and then cone down. Instead of coning up right away, I actually like to cone down from this position. This does a couple of things. It helps bring the clay a little bit more to center, but when your hand is touching the edge of the clay, it also helps to seal this part of the clay down here. And that downward pressure also helps to stick the clay down. So if you do that first before you go and cone up, I can cone up quite aggressively now and the clay is not going to slide off. So the second issue that people seem to have is lack of strength. They're trying to push the clay with the arm, which is going to be a lot weaker than using your body. So elbows on your thigh, which is pretty standard, but I also like to tell people to bring their left elbow in, or your non-dominant elbow, so the one that you're pushing forward with, more into your body, so that when you lean forward, you're actually applying your body weight into the clay, which is going to be a lot stronger and also a lot steadier. So if there's all this body mass behind your arm, when the clay push back, it's not going to move your hand as easily. Where if your clay is off center and your arms are out here, you can see my hands are wobbling quite a lot because it's not fighting the clay that much. Where if my hand is down and my elbows are tucked in, the clay is now pushing against my entire upper body and also my arm. And all I need is lean forward and you can see the clay starts to center already, and then slowly lean back, and that's already a lot steadier. So using this, you don't have to rely on a lot of arm strength. So next one is twisting or decapitating your clay. So this is what it looks like. Often you'll cone up like this, and then actually you don't want too much water. So this is kind of a spoiler as to why this happens, is when your clay is very dry and you're trying to cone up, and then suddenly it comes off and you've got a little ball of clay that just got decapitated, and you're trying to stick it back down and then try to fix that. If this happens, don't try and stick it back, because what you're doing is you're just introducing a lot of air bubble. You can use the remaining bit of clay, but don't try and put that back on. But this is a very common issue, and if that happens, it means that as you're coning up, you're not using enough water, one. Basically, it's too much friction and too much force on the clay. So where you're applying pressure onto the clay, that part, the more pressure you put on and the more friction there are, the slower this part turns. So if this part of the clay spins slower than the bottom part, what you're going to get is a twist. And then that twist will then rip the clay off. So that's one reason why. The other reason is when you're coning up, instead of using your entire palm, like the height of your palm, you're using just this part. So sometimes people are like, I see this often with beginners classes where the teacher goes, okay, you're using this part of the palm to apply pressure, and then people think, okay, that means I'm doing it this way. So often I see people trying to cone up with their hands slightly outwards. So you've got a very small point of contact here, and with that, you're gonna cut the clay off very consistently. There's two solutions to this. One, make sure you have enough water when you're coning up so that it's nice and slippery and the clay's not moving at different speeds. And secondly, you want to use the entire height of your palm. So when you apply pressure, you're going in with all this. So if my hand is the clay, my palm kind of looks like this, okay, instead of like this. Another way of thinking is keep your hand perpendicular to the wheel. I find going inwards is not great, going outwards is not great. So you want it perpendicular so you can keep the wall nice and straight. So that's going to look like, I might just use one hand so it's a bit easy to see. So I'm coning up by pushing in the side, the clay's going up, 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 and then coning back down. Okay, so another common problem is called a volcano. This happens when you're centering, and then all of a sudden you notice there's a little bit of hole in the middle. The clay is just moving up from the side, but the middle's not moving. So this is also very common. What happens is, this happens because before you cone up, the top of the clay is very flat. So when you apply pressure from the side, sometimes you apply pressure around the top as well, the side of the clay moves up faster than the clay in the middle. I'm going to keep this nice and flat, even if I just do one hand, so that you can see a bit better. You can see how the side of the clay is a little bit taller than the middle here. And you don't want to just close it, because once you close it, the air is trapped inside. So to fix this issue, you want to make sure when you comb back down to not just go from the very top, you actually want to go from this side here and try and bring this side down. And I actually like to do it until the middle part has like a little knob sticking out. So that way I know all that clay is moved upwards, and if there's any air bubbles there or any weird clay, I can just get rid of that clay, and then I know that's nice and solid. But to prevent this from happening, when you comb down, you want to make sure the shape that you create is more rounded. So a little bit taller in the middle, and then it kind of gradually goes off there. And once you've got this shape, I can comb up, and the middle part has time to catch up. So see how it comes out? You know, I'll get rid of that slip. We've got a nice rounded shape. All right, what's next? Okay. So, spiral. So what does spiral look like? Spiral look like this. Actually, that's it's not bad. So another issue, this is not very obvious, but you get a little spiral along your cone like this. Basically, for both centering and pulling of wall, when you see a spiral, it means one thing. Your wheel is going too slow and your hand's going too fast. They're kind of relative, so the faster the wheel, the faster you can move with your hand and still get the even rotation for the clay. So basically, you want, every time you touch the clay, you want it to go a full circle before your hand leaves that spot. So if you go very quickly, you're going to get a spiral. Same thing with pulling the wall. If you go too fast, you're going to get a spiral. You can do that on purpose if you want a spiral mug, but when you're centering, you want the clay to be a bit more even. So basically increase your wheel speed. When we're centering, our wheel should be quite fast, if not full speed, depending on what you're comfortable with. And then with your hand, you can try move faster, but you know, fast wheel, slow hand is always the way to go. You can't really go too slow, especially with centering. And then you can see that it's much smoother. A little bit of spiral is fine, a bit of throwing line is fine. But if I really want to go get rid of the spiral, I'm going to go full speed on my wheel and just go up very slowly. You can see the cone's a little bit better. So another issue is this, which I like to call the mushroom. Basically what happens is when you're coning down, you're not controlling the wall. So you apply pressuring down, but you're not really controlling what the side of the clay is doing. So without any pressure on the side, it just gets pushed out, and then you get a bit of that mushroom shape. What could also be the case is if your hand position is a bit weird, make sure your hand is perpendicular to the wheel. If it goes out or in, it might cause issue. So if my hands are also too rounded, so almost like I'm throwing off the hump, I'm just grabbing the ball of clay and I'm not dealing with the rest, that's also going to cause a mushrooming issue. But if my hands are too far tilted like this, or in the close-up like this instead of flat, then you're going to get this issue. So when you're coming down, you want to make sure this hand is perpendicular, applying even pressure from top to bottom of the palm. That I'm applying a little bit of pressure from this hand, pushing forward using my body weight to stop the clay from escaping outwards. So that as I go down to this part, I'm applying pressure along the side of the clay and also the top of the clay. So the entire profile here should have pressure evenly from both hands. Another centering issue is just the pancake. So basically this is partly technique and partly just not knowing when to stop. When you want to center your clay, you don't want to go too wide because then there's not much clay to work with, and then it's going to be really hard to bring all that clay back up. This usually happens again from the side pressure, not applying pressure to constrain the outside of the clay or the wall of the clay. And without that, the clay is pushing your hand out slowly as you push the clay down. So it's a simple fix. So when you bring the clay down, making sure you're applying a bit of pressure from the side and don't let the clay push you out. And also once you get the shape that you're happy with, you're gonna stop somewhere around here, make sure you're a bit more of a dome shape. Stop the clay from going out too far, and also don't push down so much that the clay becomes pancake. So the last issue that we're gonna troubleshoot is called the nipple. Basically, as you cone down, you're gonna keep going. You're gonna get your bit of a dome, but then you're gonna get this little bit of clay that keeps creeping upwards and even break like that. The middle of the clay is not being controlled. So that could either be your thumb sliding away from the middle, or if you're using more karate chop, that it's sliding to the side and not controlling the middle. So it's a very simple fix. You just want to make sure that when you're coning down, your hand is right on the middle part of the clay. Or if you use more of the chicken drumstick that I teach a lot of people, especially with smaller clay, I find that a lot easier. So as I cone down, my thumb is covering the middle of the clay, and then that part won't stick out. If it sticks out, just push it back down. So those are some basic kind of common things that I always see. If you've seen some or you've experienced some problems of your own, leave in the comment. I can do another series like a part 2 to more of these troubleshooting guides for centering. I'll probably do the same for, you know, each part of the process as well. Troubleshooting throwing, trimming and glazing and all that stuff. But, you know, starting from the basic, that's the centering.